Greetings and welcome to another episode of Two Bald Guys. My name is Eric Giordano and I'm the Executive Director at the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service, also known as WIPS, and I'm joined by my co-host Dave Anderson. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Eric, thank you very much. Yes, my name is Dave Anderson. I'm a Senior Policy Fellow at WIPS, and today we're going to be revisiting the topic of race in America, which was a subject of our program 1 year ago today. Hard to believe it's been a year already, in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder and subsequent protests. We're fortunate to have the same two outstanding guests that we spoke with on this topic last year. For those not familiar with WIPS, we are a unit of the University of Wisconsin system, founded in 2007, with a mission to educate and engage citizens, develop future leaders, provide research-driven solutions, and bring the resources of the university to address community-identified needs.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. That's right. And we're going to stray a little bit from our normal format today. First of all, we're going to skip our usual banter because we have a lot to talk about with our guests and we want to get right to it. Second, due to our guests' busy schedules, and we're so grateful they're willing to join us, we're pre-recording this episode, so we will not be able to take live audience questions. However, if you have any questions or comments about this show or others, you're welcome to share them by posting them to the Facebook chat section, or you can send them to us at info@wips.org. That's info@wipps.org. And finally, before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge and thank our producer, Luke Rudolph. Thank you so much, Luke.
You know, Eric, we don't often have repeat guests on our show. And it's really an honor and a privilege for me to reintroduce to you two guests who, as I mentioned earlier, were part of our show a year ago. First, I'd like to introduce Mr. Reggie Jackson, co-owner and lead trainer of Nurturing Diversity Partners and former head griot with America's Black Holocaust Museum in Milwaukee. He also serves as a senior columnist for the Milwaukee Independent and was recently awarded the Carter G. Woodson Memorial Award from the National Education Association. Reggie, welcome back to the show. We're just thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, pleasure to be back.
Second, I'd like to introduce Jarrett Adams, who's the founder and owner of the law office of Jarrett Adams, with offices in New York and Chicago, and now Milwaukee. Jarrett is also of counsel with the law offices of Birdsall Obear Associates LLC. Jarrett specializes in criminal and civil law. Prior to that, he was an attorney at the Innocence Project and formerly a client who was wrongfully convicted and sentenced to prison for a crime he did not commit, and then exonerated with the help of the Wisconsin Innocence Project. Welcome back, Jarrett. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for inviting me back.
Yeah, and thanks for joining us all the way from LA, Mr. Adams. We appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime, guys.
Okay, we're going to jump right in. Now we're a year out from the George Floyd murder, followed right during that year by massive nationwide protests and calls for action. And I guess our first question for you is kind of the big one, which is, have we made any substantial progress concretely towards addressing real issues faced by people of color in America, in your opinion?
Who takes the first shot, Eric?
Yeah, whoever wants to. I know it's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to make it seem like we haven't had any type of progress, because we've had progress. We've had conversations, but we need to document, to see, because that's the only way we're going to really be able to tell if this is just conversation or if this is real implementation of the things that we need to change. And all of this, and I want to be clear with what I'm saying. True criminal justice reform starts on every state level, right? So for people, who want to get involved, who want to help, don't worry about and hashtagging stuff from different states. Look in your own backyard. Start in your own county, in your own jurisdiction, to see what's going on there. And that's how we collectively get to change. So until we start to go in and look at who was in office before George Floyd, who is in office now, and look at their history, look at their track record. You know, if they're out here and they're preaching divisive rhetoric, it's time for them to go. If we can all agree that it is really time for true criminal justice reform, it does not mean that we don't like people. We want to throw them away. We just want to ask that they allow someone else to come and do what they swore they would do when they took their positions. So in terms of change, it's a ways out from me saying, Eric, we're all good, man. Everything is good and we don't have to worry about that. But I do want to acknowledge that there have been serious discussion. There's been serious legislation coming through, but we need to see more of it. We need to see the same effects that they had. You know, whenever we want to lock someone up or be tough on crime, you know, we don't hesitate to go to podiums, pass legislation. The bills that pass legislation the fastest and the quickest is always the tough on crime, lock them up. Everybody should be on board with this. I want to see that with what we have going on right now. I want to see the legislation passed. I want to see everybody on board, but you just simply aren't seeing all of that happening with the expediency in which a situation like this, a pandemic like this requires. We aren't seeing as quickly as I wanted to see and as quickly as we needed.
Thank you. Reggie, any thoughts?
You know, I wrote an article last year called, it's great that you're woke, but are you going to get out of the bed and do something? You know, people are woke, they're aware, you know, they're reading books that they wouldn't have read before, they're having conversations they never had before. That's progress to me. That's significant progress because we've seen people of color and white people work together cohesively in a nationwide protest after George Floyd was murdered, which spread to the rest of the world, right? That's huge to me, that's big. But when you look at the polls right after George Floyd was murdered, about 3 weeks after he was murdered, a majority of people in the country, every ethnic and racial group was over 80% in approval of the Black Lives Matter movement. 3 months later, the only group that was still over 80% were Black people. Everybody else had fallen by the wayside, down 50, 60%, some even less than that. So, you know, this emotion that came out of seeing this man, you know, begging for his life, calling his mother's name, built something inside of Americans that it was just, you had to say and do something. But at the end of the day, people go back to their regular lives. And just as Jarrett said, we have to understand, and I've said this, and I'll say this for the rest of my life, real reform of police is not what we're seeing. We're seeing bills that are passed, oh, we're gonna ban chokeholds. Listen, chokeholds aren't the problem. They're not choking people to death all across the country. They're shooting people to death. They're tasing people and killing people with tasers. If we want some real reform, we have to address what the real issue is. And to me, I've always said this, that the criminal justice system is not a criminal justice system. You literally have over 3,000 criminal justice systems in the country. Every county has their own system, just as Jarrett said. If you're not working at the local level, you're not working in the county that you're working in, you're never going to make any real progress. And I believe very firmly that we have to admit something that many people are afraid to admit, because all of us have been bombarded with cop shows that I call propaganda for our entire lives. We think that's how the so-called criminal justice system works in the real world. It doesn't work like it does on Law and Order. I can't even watch Law and Order anymore because they lie too much on Law and Order. So to me, the biggest thing we need to address, and people are afraid to say this out loud, but I'm not, there's something fundamentally flawed with the way we police in this country. The fact that police in this country kill over 1,000 people every year, there's something seriously wrong with policing in this country. Violence is built into policing in this country. We should have peace officers, not police officers. But because we're okay with it, because on TV, they always get the bad guys. And, you know, it's always the police are the good guys, the DAs, the good guys, and they never show those instances where people like Jarrett are victimized by the system, where thousands of people have been falsely accused and then falsely sent to prison. And many of them are sitting in prisons right as we speak, and they will never get out, right? They will spend decades in prison because it's very rare that people who are falsely accused have the benefit of the doubt with our system. And just as Jared said, we love punishing people. We don't have a problem. Lock them up, throw away the key, right? Those pieces of legislation, the one that people talked about the most, 1994 crime bill, which everybody, criticized, everybody whose name was on that. Listen, I tell people that wasn't the worst bill that was ever passed. That was the biggest in terms of money. But when you look back, to me, the worst crime bill ever passed was 1986. That was a year that Len Bias died of a cocaine overdose. Charles Rogers of the Cleveland Browns died of a cocaine overdose. And that legislation, which led to some of the worst penalties for drug crimes in the nation's history, they literally had no debate over that bill. None. It was introduced, it was voted on, and it became law. So we don't understand how the system works because we keep watching these ridiculous propaganda shows. I tell people, stop watching them. Talk to a real police officer, talk to a district attorney, talk to someone who's been, wrongly incarcerated, talk to people that know how the system really works. And you'll understand that the reforms that we're seeing, they're nothing. They're not significant. They're not going to change anything, in my opinion.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to follow up a little bit. So obviously there's unfinished business, and that was to be expected in the sense that, this kind of change obviously isn't going to happen overnight, and certainly not even within a year. But let's talk about a couple of specific examples of things that would be an indicator to you of substantial change. For example, and we've already talked, you talked a little bit about that already. You talked about some of the criminal justice reforms, policing reforms. Is there anything else that would be a signal to you that we're actually making a difference that we haven't already talked about?
I don't know about a signal, Eric. Like, it's really, you follow the money. That tells you where people's motivations are, and their desires are in American politics and social change. And so I don't want viewers to think that it's like doom, gloom, and throw away the entire building. But I'm telling you, Eric, I don't see anything that confirms to me that real change is coming down the pipeline. And I'll give you another example of that. So now, this new administration has been in office now, right? It's May, okay? So where's the second, third, fourth, fifth, and 10th step act at? Because we had the first, right? The last administration did the first, and if they intended for it just to be that, it wouldn't have been called the First Step Act. So now we got the first step by someone who we can all agree, wasn't necessarily a criminal justice reformer. And forget necessarily, was not a true criminal justice reformer. That entire administration reversed back a lot of things that the prior administration before that, the Obama administration did. They did away with a lot of the uncapped prison phone calls, charges that you could charge folks. So now we had that First Step Act come out of there. So the natural expectation and the promises that were made was that this new administration was certainly not like that, and we can expect more. Now, we have dealt with the pandemic and getting people's vaccinations. And if I'm not mistaken, Joe stood up there with a pair of aviators on and told us that we could take the mask off now. So if they've made that announcement, I want them to now announce the plan and the action steps for the pandemic that is criminal justice reform. And how do you see that? What did they do when they wanted to attack this pandemic? What they do? They got in there, they were in there all night, and they passed legislation that opened the purse string up to billions of dollars to get the economy right, to help small loans. Then why can't we see that? Me and Reggie are going to mirror what we have to say a lot, right? Because it's the truth. And it's what we keep asking for and asking for. All of this talking, all of this rhetoric, it doesn't matter what side you're on, Republican, Democrat. I tell people all the time, I'm not either one, I'm a realocrat. That's what I am, right? Whoever's being real and being honest about what they're going to do, you will get my vote, right? And in this situation, where's the announcement about the money, about the real work that's going to be done? And here's how the government can do that. How many times have we seen the government incentivize different counties, states, and jurisdictions to do the things that they want to do, and they will give them grant money? So you're telling me that they can't figure out a way to say, look, individual counties, if you have so and so and so and so, and we review this, and your jurisdiction has this, and you're addressing these problems, and you're now sending out, social workers instead of police with guns to situations that should resolve with people being placed inside of mental health care facilities, we're placing them in the grave because we're sending officers with guns. So until I see that, Eric, I don't see any true signs that they're serious about this.
Yeah, and for me personally, I've said this to police officers here in Milwaukee at the county level, the sheriffs, the Milwaukee police chief, command structure, and I will continue to say the same thing to them. Listen, one thing that the community, particularly the Black and brown community, don't like about policing is there's no transparency in policing. Listen, police officers shoot and kill somebody, you don't find out who that officer is right away. If I was to go out in front of my house and shoot somebody tonight, I can guarantee you my name will be on every news channel in Milwaukee immediately. And the next day in the newspaper, my life story will be in the newspaper. But a police officer can choke somebody to death, can shoot somebody to death, and it may be months before we find out who this officer is. In addition to that, charges. Listen, if you commit a crime and you're a civilian, you're going to be treated in a very specific way, right? If you are a police officer and you commit a crime, you're going to be treated in a different way. You're not treated the same. And I've said, if you want people to trust policing and accountability with policing, treat police officers who commit crimes. And we know they do it. Let's not lie. Let's not pretend that they don't. They're human beings just like the rest of us. Most police officers that I know are great, great people. They're risking their lives every day. They're wonderful individuals. But within the system protects officers who are criminals. We don't announce who their names are right away. We don't charge them with the same types of crime that we would charge, civilians with. It's very rare that we do. And then you have a body camera. You have a camera on the police car that can tell you exactly what happened. Multiple body cams from multiple officers on the scene. And you literally have to have a judge order you to release the footage. I mean, footage just came out of a man who was killed 2 years ago. And you saw what happened on that video, that not only did they kill this man, they beat the man, they tased him, and they dragged him like he was a dead animal. And they didn't show the video for 2 years. They finally released it 2 years later. This is why the Black and brown community do not trust the criminal justice system. You don't treat criminal police officers the way you treat other people that you call criminals. And it's very simple. I say, listen, if you want people to trust you, admit that some police officers do things they shouldn't do. Let's not pretend like officers are perfect. There's no police officer that's perfect. And I'll tell you, the most honest police officers you'll ever talk to are retired police officers.
Indeed.
They are honest because guess what? Their pension has kicked in. So they're not in fear of losing their pension. They're not in fear of losing their job because there's certain things they can't say as on-duty police officers. I've talked to a lot of those police officers, and they are very open and honest about the issues with policing. And they know better than anybody else what you can do to fix policing, but nobody wants to listen to them. They tell people, these officers have all told me, everyone I've talked to said the same thing. As an active duty police officer, you can't be a snitch. You can't snitch on other officers. If you expect to keep your job, get promoted, have protection from your fellow officers, you can't be a snitch. And if you are, then that's probably going to be the end of your career. Yet they tell people in the community, snitch on those people in your neighborhood that are committing crimes. It's hypocrisy. If you want us to be cooperative with police, then you have to be transparent and honest. And until I see those things happen, and I'm sorry, I've seen that in very few places where they're going to be open and honest about it. then you're not going to have trust. If you don't have trust from the community, then none of these so-called reforms are going to mean anything other than just lip service.
You know, both of you have touched on the protests that have gone on across the country this last year, and certainly protests as part of the fabric of what our country is all about, right? I mean, our country was born out of protest, but we've really seen a resurgence of protest activity since a year ago, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on what we've learned this past year about the role and impact of organized protests, or maybe put a different way, what role do they have and how effective are they in bringing about some of the meaningful social change that we've been talking about here this morning? Reggie, why don't we start with you this time?
Well, listen, I think a lot of people pretend like this is 1963. This is not 1963. You know, the practices and policies and things that Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement did, those things don't work the same today. Let me tell you the biggest difference between the protests back then and the protests today, right? Back in the 1960s, Black people were protesting for voting rights and the end of segregation, things of that nature. And what happened? The police were brutalizing these people, right? We all saw the video from Birmingham. We saw the fire hoses by the police department. We saw the German shepherds. We saw the bloody Sunday march at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And that's what outraged people, was the police brutality. That's what outraged people. And guess what? That's why people came down to Mississippi during Freedom Summer, because they saw the police brutalizing these peaceful protesters. And that led to this resurgence of empathy for the Black community, and we have to go and help them and all this other stuff. But guess what? We see the same police brutality last year. We see people who are protesting against police brutality being brutalized by the police. And what happens? Instead of the media covering saying, oh my goodness, the police are shooting rubber bullets at people that are throwing water bottles. Police are sitting there in an armored vehicle, somehow afraid of a plastic water bottle. And they're brutalizing these people, breaking people's arms, shooting people with rubber bullets, people losing their eyesight, all these things, literally brutalizing the heck out of people under the cover of darkness. And then claiming that, oh, these were violent protests. No, you know when they became violent? When you started being violent with these people. Don't tell me that these police officers, trained police officers with a 9mm sitting on their hip, are afraid of a darn water bottle being thrown at them. It's ridiculous. So what happens is people are in the mindset of 1963, and you don't understand. The media that promoted empathy does the exact opposite today. They do not do the same thing they did before. So you have to understand those things are not going to work as effectively as they did before, because now what we're seeing this year in particular is we're seeing hundreds of bills being talked about in legislatures across the country in over 30 states that are now putting limits on your ability to protest. They're not saying you can't protest, but they're saying if you do protest, well, guess what? You're going to commit a new crime, because we just wrote this new law that says if you are protesting and you do X, Y, and Z, oh, there's a law that says you can't do that anymore. And you're going to get a $1,500 fine. You're going to get 2 years in prison. They're literally trying to limit people's ability to protest, because they know the ability to protest is protected in the Constitution. But what you do when you protest is not protected. You can protest all you want, but what you do when you protest is not being protected. And we're seeing state after state after state having these new policies and practices, laws in place that most Americans don't have a clue about, that will limit your ability to protest. And I keep telling people, man, listen, this is 2021. 2021 calls for 2021 solutions, not 1963 solutions. They don't work the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. And then I just to expand on it, I mean, just think about this. So now, and this was after we had the first talk. So now you got protests, you got folks, showing out in force. And yeah, there was some looting that went on, no doubt about it, right? But look at the stark contrast. So in Milwaukee, they had those kids and adults, they had their faces like all in the newspaper, all in the news. And they were able to get the footage from some of the stores, right? That were looted. So now fast forward, the Capitol is invaded by a bunch of thugs, right? And you telling me that a Capitol, first of all, what you're telling me is that no one had a heads up that this was coming, right? Even though there was an announcement, the day before that it was coming. No one decided to look at Flight Manifest to see that, it's a bunch of people from rural areas down south that are coming to DC on the same day. Let me look at this, right? No one decided to have the Capitol, just in case, right, secured by the National Guard, and the same people acted when there was just a rumor that Black Lives Matter was going to protest in Washington. That whole building was surrounded. And then when people looked like they wanted to get close, they were pushed across the street with batons and forced to go past a church so the president could come and make a statement, right? But then you look at this insurrection, because that's what it was. Now all of a sudden, the Capitol cameras don't work to identify the more than 300, thousands of people that we saw running in this building, right? Now where the folks in Milwaukee whose faces have been plastered, who've been arrested and who've been charged, like they literally were struggling to get out on bond. But the people from the insurrection, they were able to get bonds, get out, and they weren't just going there to take some items out of the store. They were going there with the plan to take lives. So that right there speaks volumes for all that we need to know about where's the meter at on the change in society and how we handle things. It's ridiculous. And at this point, I think that we can all say it's safe to say, stop playing and having games, and holding games and discussions about if we got a problem in America with how society treats its Black and brown communities. Stop playing, okay? Because it's right there. The proof is right there, and it continues to show its head over and over and over again. So in terms of effectiveness, to answer your question directly, I think that it's effective, but I don't think that it's the only thing that we need to be doing. We need to be strategically doing these marches at the same time that we're strategically trying to find a replacement for the oppressors of justice and equality. Rarely do you just need salt. You need a little pepper to go with that thing. So we need more than just marching. We need the replacement strategy of the idiots who believe that equality means their extinction.
You're on mute, Eric.
Of course, had to do that, right? So thank you for those responses. And this is a good segue to our next question, which is another tough one. There's only tough questions around these issues. So there was, or how do you respond and speak to fellow citizens who may acknowledge that racism exists? I'm sure you guys have come across these people. I certainly have, but who believe that they're not racist or that there is no such thing as systemic racism, and therefore they don't feel any responsibility for addressing change. And this is actually the issue that was sort of the subject of that New York Times article recently about Dave in my hometown here in Wausau, Wisconsin, in Marathon County that we were talking about earlier. So if you haven't seen that, you can look that up. But anyway, how do you talk to people like this or respond to those kind of sentiments?
No, I don't, look, some people just aren't going to get it because they don't want to get it, Eric. That's the whole thing. They're passing down their rhetoric and fear mongering. They're passing it down to insulate their stability and financial security. That's really what it is. This thing, it's a scary psychological thing that happens, because what happens is you have folks who don't have the issues that other folks have, that they're trying to get to be afraid and be on this side and against that side and stuff like that. And so what I'll say is this, it's hard to get people to have the sympathy and empathy for other folks if they're not around those other folks and don't have any intimate knowledge of what those other folks have went through. So, look, Reggie says this all the time. Go do your research. Like, forget your feelings, put your feelings to the side, go do your research. And then how do you feel? Right? Because if people knew intimately how set up this thing was from its inception, I doubt that they can have the feeling of, I don't care about that. That didn't have anything to do with me. You can't, not if you're a human being who loves human beings and has a moral compass. There's no way you can ignore what has happened to African Americans, since we were kidnapped and brought over here from the boat. And it's difficult. You're right. It's a difficult conversation to have, but you can't heal until you acknowledge where the pain is. You can't. And we don't do it. We just try to, oh man, it'll be all right. Look, we'll get government aid. We from the time and time again, we've never effectively addressed race in our country. And so now we're simply passing it down in our lineage every time. We're just passing it down. We're passing down the same issue, and the issue is morphing, and we won't fix what the real problem is. And the real problem is this. We got to tear this thing up, Eric. And I know that scares people, but what I'm saying by tear it up is this. We have to go back through how the infrastructures were built to include the voices of those who are disproportionately impacted, because those are the people who weren't at the table when it was built, Eric. I don't know why this is so hard for people to understand when they keep saying, well, I didn't have anything. Well, I didn't. Look, this thing was built. If you agree that you are benefiting off how this thing was built, you are benefiting off of Black people, okay? Black people built the White House. Black people came up with a host of different ideas that they never got credit for. And if you can acknowledge that, then you have to be able to acknowledge that we have to figure out how to help a hurting community. You have a community that is in shambles, that is in rambles, and you can't lock your way up out of this. And until we acknowledge that, we're going to continue to have the same problems that we're having. They'll just be in different shapes and sizes.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this is the way I approach this with people, because I run into these people all the time, right? And this is what I always say. I said, well, start with this idea. It's not about you. Right? It's not about you. You're individualizing. You're making it seem like this is all about you. It's not about you as an individual. This is about systemic racism. This isn't about individual acts of bigotry. You calling somebody the N-word, you refusing to hire somebody because they're Hispanic. That's not what it's about. What it's about is a system that was built by your founding fathers that created an atmosphere that still lasts to this day, that was built to benefit white people, to the detriment of anybody who wasn't considered white. And even some people that we call white today weren't always considered white. Jewish people weren't considered white when they first got here. Italians, Irish weren't considered white when they got here. They eventually became white, but believe me, they were treated horribly when they first got here. You have a system that was designed to build in advantages for white people and build in disadvantages for people who are not considered white, who you haven't allowed into, this group that you call white, which doesn't even exist. Race is a myth. It's not even real. But if you can acknowledge that it's not about you, and you can go back and you can re-educate yourself. This is why I always tell people, our way of teaching American history is the way every country teaches history. They teach you history to make you feel good about your country, to make you be a patriot and love your country. And the only way you can honestly do that in the United States is to leave out all the ugly parts, or leave out most of the ugly parts. And even when you talk about the ugly parts, you talk about them in such a flowery way. Well, slavery was bad, but they were singing in the fields, Reggie. It couldn't have been that bad. Yeah. They weren't singing in the fields because they were happy. Listen, they had children ripped out of their arms. The moment that baby was born, somebody sold that baby away. So, we have to relearn the true history of America to understand how we got to where we are. And this includes everybody. I came up with this term I call an aversion to diversity, that America has never wanted to be more diverse. It's always wanted to be a whites only country. And just by happenstance, it's allowed some people who aren't white to be here. 300,000 Black people were kidnapped and brought to these shores, right? So when we think about where people are today, they are living a lie. They are living a myth of what America is and how it became what it is. White people have gotten what I call the hookup for so long that they don't even realize they're getting the hookup. They don't think about the Homestead Act. You kill the Indians off, you take their land and you give it to white people for next to nothing. Because almost everybody that got land under the Homestead Act was white, right? Then you have the Federal Housing Administration in 1930 said, we want to make Americans homeowners at a rate that they've never been homeowners before. And guess what? From 1930 to 1960, 98% of the loans that the Federal Housing Administration gave went to white people only. White people wrote racial restrictive covenants saying that people of color, particularly Black people, can't live in this neighborhood with us. Legally cannot live next door to us. They can't lease, they can't rent, they can't own this house. And those were legally binding agreements for decades. The GI Bill comes along, it's supposed to help all of those GIs, and over 1 million Blacks served in World War II. You're supposed to come back and get free college, free technical school. You're supposed to get a loan for a house, a loan for a business, but you come back as a Black soldier and it doesn't work the same way. You can't get access to Ole Miss back in 1945 if you Black. You can't go to Mississippi State, my home state. You couldn't go to University of Alabama. You couldn't go to Clemson, University of North Carolina, Texas, all of these schools that you see with all these Black basketball and football players now. You couldn't come back as a Black GI and have those same benefits, but whites got it, right? So they got access to home ownership, which builds family generational wealth for decades and generations into the future. Black people are prevented from having that same thing. You can't get access to the business loans. So you can't walk down the street in Milwaukee and see a plumbing truck drive past and it says, Poblocki Plumbing or something like that. We've been in business since 1949. You're not going to see Jackson Plumbing that says we've been in business since 1949. It may say we've been in business since 1989. Because Black people couldn't get access to those loans to start those businesses that they hand down to their children and eventually grandchildren. So we have to understand, if we want to be honest about these things, that America has built a system that was designed to benefit white people and has benefited white people. And white people love to tell themselves that they have what they have because of the Protestant work ethic. No, that had nothing to do with it. I'm not saying you didn't work hard, but don't tell me you were working hard when Black people were out there working for free. We built the U.S. We built the White House, we built the Capitol, we built Monticello, where Thomas Jefferson, was famously saying all men are created equal. At the same time, he owned over 300 Black people during the course of his life. So let's not be hypocrites and pretend we don't know. There's enough scholarship out there that people can't listen. People used to be able to say, well, I don't know. My family never owned any slaves. I don't care if your family owned slaves or not. It's irrelevant. Because if you lived in Europe, if your family came from England, well, guess what? You know who shipped millions of Black people across the Atlantic Ocean, not just to America, but to Canada, to Mexico, to Haiti, to Jamaica, to Colombia, all these places? The English did, the French did, the Portuguese did, the Spanish did, all these people. So all of Europe was implicated in the transatlantic slave trade, in this transportation of at least 15 million Black people across the Atlantic Ocean. Black people were not standing on the shores of West Africa waiting for somebody to bring them a clipboard saying, put my name on it, I want to go to America. We were forced to come here. And we were forced to work for free for 246 years in this country. And even though slavery supposedly ended in 1865, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution said that slavery and involuntary servitude are illegal except as punishment for a crime you've been duly convicted of, allowing a system called the convict lease system to be created in 1865 and last all the way into the early 1940s, where Black men were charged with crimes under new laws called Black codes and forcibly worked to death. Many of them worked to death. So we don't know enough about American history to claim that, systemic racism does exist. I tell people the first book you need to read, if you have that mindset, read a book called Racism Without Racist. And you'll understand why people believe that nonsense. Because people have been telling them for decades that, racism is real in America, but there aren't any racists though. That's what people believe. I couldn't possibly be a racist. I don't care if you're racist. The system is racist, whether you are or not.
And look, really what this is about right now, it's about doing the right thing, man. Like we try to make it so difficult to do the right thing. So what is the right thing? The right thing, if something is broken, we look to what? Repair it, right? So we know something is broken. We know what it is. So why can't we repair? And how do we repair? With reparations. That's how we repair. We're not talking about lining up a group of people and telling everybody, come get your $1 million check. We're talking about reparations in the form of, I want to see the best of the best schools in the worst of the worst neighborhoods. And don't tell me you can't do it, because you go down there and you find our young babies that are talented and could dunk a ball and run a football. You always find your way down in the worst neighborhoods then. So you could come down in the worst neighborhoods and you can, instead of plucking our talent, you can come down there and build an institution to encourage and nurture that talent. So you want to talk about reparations? I don't think that reparations, okay, let's talk about this. And I think I said this before. How do you think all that cotton was picked? What do you think all that cotton built? How do you think the stock market plays off of that cotton? Oh, okay, I can't get you there. How do you think all those oranges were picked? How do you think all that orange juice was made? How do you think all those corporations came to be the same corporations that we know right now? How do you think all that tobacco was picked? How do you think all the tobacco companies, who are institutions right now and now getting in the marijuana industry, how do you think that they got so strong? So I hate to even have these conversations about why it should affect and draw the heartstrings of people, just because they feel like they weren't directly, or their descendants didn't directly, and all of that. This is about what's right, what's wrong, and what do we do to fix it?
Okay, I'm going to skip ahead, Dave, to another question here, and
Sure.
I don't know if we can put a positive spin on this, because, you've made a really excellent case that there's not a lot. I mean, there's positive, there's historical change that's happened, but we still obviously have a long way to go here. But Reggie, I'm going to address this to you for a minute. You've been virtually crisscrossing Wisconsin and many other states, working with communities, governments, businesses, nonprofits around issues of diversity. And you recently mentioned having seen some reason to be hopeful. And heaven knows, after this conversation, we could use a little hope. Is there some reason why we should feel hope or not?
Well, let me tell you, Eric, Dave, Jarrett, the reason I feel hope is because I've been out there with people that are doing this work, right? I've done work in about 50 different communities in the state of Wisconsin. I've crisscrossed the state. I've been to Wausau, I've been to Appleton, I've been to La Crosse, I've been to Burlington, I've been to Platteville, Whitewater, Port Washington, Racine, Kenosha, Madison. I've been in so many different communities, and I see white people that feel the same way that Jarrett and I feel. Like, listen, man, we need to start repairing things, because this system is broken. This system is unfair. Racism is real. We want to learn about it. We want to learn about the details of how we got to where we are, so that we can start having honest conversations about fixing things. Because the last thing these folks want that I meet, and people always say, well, Reggie, you're just preaching to the choir. And I said, that's fine with me, because the choir keeps getting bigger every day. Every month that I'm out there, the choir keeps getting bigger and bigger. And what I'm seeing are white people that are part of the middle of the bell curve, right? I'm not talking to the people on the edges of the bell curve. I could care less about those people, because those people have their minds made up. But a majority of people are in the middle of that bell curve, right? So those are the people that when I go out to these communities, those are people that I see. These are the people that are leaning one way or the other, depending on the peer pressure that they feel. And these are the people that are having book clubs to learn about these things. These are the people that are hiring us to come and do presentations and workshops and facilitated dialogue with them, because they really want to see positive change happen, right? And there's a boatload of these white people out there, but they're drowned out by that minority of white people that have a big megaphone in front of them, that are being very divisive, that are pushing back against them. And this is what I tell those folks that I'm out reaching, right? Those people that really want to see positive change happen, those white people. This is what I always tell them. Listen, there's a lot more you than you think there are. There's a lot more white people that feel the way you feel than you think. You are in a position where you're feeling a great deal of peer pressure, because guess what? Uncle Bob doesn't want things to change, because Uncle Bob likes, being able to use the N-word, at Thanksgiving dinner every year. You have people at your job. You have people that are your neighbors, your bowling buddies, your golf buddies, whatever. You have a lot of white people that are pushing back against these things, because they have this insane thought in their mind that if people of color gain something, white people have to lose something. There's more than enough abundance for everybody in this society. But the challenge is to make people understand that just because, diversity, equity, inclusion conversations seem to, in some ways, in the minds of some people, blame white people. Listen, it's not about blaming white people. It's about being honest. Listen, it's about being honest and acknowledging that this is the case. And when I go out and I talk to people and I get feedback from people, what I hear all the time is like, Reggie, thank you for sharing that history, because I use a historical lens all the time. You guys know me. I use history to teach people how to see the world differently. When you know certain things, you have different conversations than you had before. When you know how segregation really developed, you're no longer going to say, well, people self-segregated. People want to live around people like themselves. No, white people self-segregated. They only wanted to live around people like themselves. No other group was able to get the federal government or local and state governments to pass measures that said we can have all Black community or all Latino community, or all Native American, whatever, right? White people have had that power. And when you engage people in an understanding of American history, they have different conversations. And now, they're going to tell Uncle Bob at Thanksgiving dinner, Uncle Bob, when you make that racist joke every year, that makes me feel uncomfortable, Uncle Bob. Now, Uncle Bob may be mad at you, but he's probably not going to make that joke next year at Thanksgiving dinner. You're going to have people pushing back against you. You guys, listen, I know you guys well enough to know that you guys are bright and honest people. And you guys are going to hear some negative stuff from some folks that listen to this, what Jarrett and I are saying. And they're going to be pushing back like, oh, I can't believe they had those two racist Black guys on their show. Like, listen, don't worry about those people. Listen, don't worry about the people that push back in your county against even having a conversation about equity. This is what, people talk about white privilege, right? Oh, they're telling me that they're privileged. Listen, first of all, before you start talking about white privilege, pick up a book and understand what white privilege is. It has nothing to do with economics. It's not about your money. It's about the fact that as a white person in 1930, you didn't have to worry about the fact that your neighborhood was redlined by the federal government and you couldn't get a loan. Mm-hmm. That's what white privilege is about. Privileges in society, not about somebody giving you some money or something. It's the privilege of knowing that you are going to be treated differently than people of color. And when it comes to this idea of people pushing back against critical race theory, all of these people that are pushing back against it, I can guarantee you, not a single one of those individuals in your county or any other state, I can guarantee you not a single one of them has ever read a book written by any of these scholars that have been studying critical race theory for decades. I guarantee they haven't picked up a book and read it. Because if they did, they'd understand that the arguments they're making are illegitimate arguments. But instead of them doing that and saying, well, let me see what these people have to say so that I can argue, my point with them. Instead of them doing that, they just say, oh, these people are calling all white people racist and they're bad and we shouldn't talk about this and we need to bury this under the sand because, oh, they're accusing white people of being this and that. Listen, honest conversations are conversations that work.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, everything he said, was a great point. And look, we're not talking about color as much as we're talking about the person as well, because you don't think for a second that we don't see and acknowledge that there are Black people who have made their way in positions of power by getting Black people to support them. And then when they get in that position of power, we don't see the effects, of our support. We don't see any of that trickle back down. So this, for the people that Reggie mentioned, who might call you guys and be like, man, they're against all white people. No, we're not. We're against all people who are against justice and equality. That's who we're against, and that's who we're talking about. And they could be Black, they could be white, they could be orange or green people, right? But predominantly, they're white people. Like just what it is. But I'm telling you, there are some folks who have ran, who are African American, who are of color, who have ran and promised the Black community and the community of color that they were going to do things. And then when they got into office, we didn't see the effects of those things. So we're talking about every person who is not delivering on what is necessary in this pandemic that we're dealing with, which is criminal justice reform and criminal relations between the communities of color and the police. Like, I mean, at some point, we've got to acknowledge this if we don't acknowledge anything else. If you don't want to acknowledge that there's racism and prejudice and inequality, that is just rampant, then you got to acknowledge that there's something wrong with the fact that that these numbers of police killings and shootings, they only seem to be happening to Black folks. I probably remember on a couple of my fingers, or probably half of one, a case where an unarmed white person, was pulled over and shot in a traffic stop in the same fashion as we seen Black people time and time and again. And when you hear the defense come out, it's always the same, isn't it? What is it? The officer feared for their life. So why do you think they're using that? They're using that because they know that is the historical defense that has always exonerated, officers and the Klan of any wrongdoing in terms of the interactions with Black people. We've allowed the narrative of Black people to be that of this grotesque, you should be in fear, you should run and hide. And that's why it's so easily digestible for folks to be like, well, the officer said he feared for his life. I can see how he feared for his life. All the Black people that I see on TV, on the news, they're committing crimes, or they have tattoos all over their face. So there's a lot going on here. But I'm gonna tell you, this is definitely predominantly the color is of the oppression of people who are in powerful white positions. But don't think for a fact that me, Reggie, and folks in the Black community and the brown community don't see that there are people who look just like us that have made their way up to positions, and all of a sudden they've forgotten how to make sure that community is taken care of. Saying that this country is racist doesn't mean that we're saying throw away with it and burn the whole house up for one insect. What we're saying is, this is the problem. This is the title of the problem. Let's fix it. So instead of us being defensive, we need to use that energy to find a way to meet in the middle and figure out equality. Like I said, if you don't believe that this is, if you don't believe the numbers, what the numbers suggest and what they show, then you got to believe that it's wrong for unarmed people, well, no matter what color you are, to end up dead in situations where they should have been de-escalated.
You listen, there's a song years ago that said, just because you got dreads on doesn't mean you're down for the cause, right? Mm-hmm. Just because you're wearing dreads doesn't mean that you're down for the cause. We know people like that. They've always been a part of our society. Back during the days when we were enslaved, they had a name for people like that. And I hate that people use the word Uncle Tom, because people haven't read Uncle Tom's Cabin to understand that Uncle Tom actually wasn't who we think Uncle Tom was. He was actually protecting his family, and that's why he did what he did. But there's another more important term that I use called factors. And these are the folks in West Africa that said, we're going to cooperate with the Portuguese and the Spanish and the French and the Dutch and the English who want to come and steal Africans. We're going to be the ones that go out and capture these people and bring them back. So factors have always been a part of our lived existence, and they always will be. And the fact that people sit and listen to this man and say, he's right, there's no racism in America. Listen, people, it's time to wake up and be honest. You can only lie for so long before you embarrass yourself. And people are literally embarrassing themselves by telling these ridiculous lies. And I'm hoping that as we move forward, that we have more spaces for folks like Jarrett and I, but most importantly, white people who feel the way that Jarrett and I feel, giving them platforms to talk. Because white people need to hear more white people saying the stuff that the two of us are saying.
Yeah,
people can look at Jarrett and I and say, we're the angry Black men. Mm-hmm. But listen, I have justification. I have reason to be angry, but I'm not. Yeah. I'm one of the calmest people you'll ever meet. But I'm going to be very honest with you. I want to see more white people standing up and saying, listen, we want to have equitable society. We want to have a society that's fair, that doesn't treat people differently because of the color of their skin, or because of all of these other different ways we marginalize people. I want to see more white people be courageous enough to stand up and speak truth to power. We don't have enough of those folks, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it's Eric, look, I'm telling you, you're right. This hour flew by. I'll say this is what I'll say too, to that point. So now you get these folks who have this rhetoric where they're like, if they acknowledge something is wrong, then they're acknowledging, that, okay, you know, it ain't right. It ain't never been right. Those aren't the same things. And what I mean by that is this. You got folks afraid to admit that we have a problem with race, that the country, the racist fabric that it was built on. You got people who are afraid to admit that because it's almost like they believe they're disrespecting America, or they don't like America, or they're being un-American and all of this nonsense. That's not the case at all. I'll give you an example, right? When the phone was first introduced, you know, we love that thing, right? We can get on the phone, we can call people. We don't have to go out to go to them. We love it. We wouldn't say anything bad about the first phone that was ever made. Well, that was until the advancements of technology, right? Now, we don't have, at least I haven't seen one. You don't see phones with the cord. Remember the cord used to be so long, Reggie? We'd be walking from the kitchen all the way through the living room with that cord, right? We've done away with that because although we love the phone, we acknowledge that we can make the phone better for who? Not one person, everyone. So I ask, we made the criminal justice system, we made the Constitution. When I say we, I'm talking about the ancestors before me who weren't my ancestors, but they were the founding fathers of America. So Constitution, criminal justice system, you know, it was great. It was made. It protected certain folks. But now we have to acknowledge, like we've acknowledged with the first phone. Look, the first phone was great, you know, but there were some things that, you know, needed to be changed and upgraded. So they were upgraded. They were accepted. So now that's what we're saying right now. You hear me? We're saying this right now. The criminal justice system, the Constitution, how it disproportionately affects people of color. Those are all the people who weren't there when it was made. It's time to upgrade. And it's time for everyone to accept it because it's going to affect everyone. I'm telling you right now, if we stop the mass incarceration and start mass education, we're going to have mass people being able to affect the masses. You don't know. No one knew Jarrett Adams had the capacity to be an attorney with 3 offices in different states and handling these cases. No one knew that, and no one would have known that if it wasn't for the Wisconsin Innocence Project reversing my conviction and these Black women I came home to, my mother and my aunts, instilling in me the importance of therapy, putting it behind you. This has been our history. You got to keep moving forward. And so it's like, look, can we at least try? Even if you don't believe it's going to work, let's just try. Let's try to see what equality looks like. Let's try to see what it looks like to repair the schools and the systems that are breaking and keeping the infrastructure of the Black and brown communities from ever getting their feet. Let's just try. How about that?
Gentlemen, thank you. On that note, we're going to conclude, but I just have to make one quick comment because Reggie, you dropped a hair reference, and you know, we 2 bald guys just have to respond. You know, we're never going to claim to be growing. Dave and I will never be claiming to grow dreads. Okay, I promise you that. But we thank you both. Thank you, Reggie Jackson. Thank you, Jarrett Adams, for taking the time to share with us your experience, your perspective about race in America. We appreciate the positive influence and voice for change that you are for us here in Wisconsin and beyond. And thanks to our viewers for tuning in today.
Thank you.
I too would like to express my appreciation to Reggie and Jarrett for being here today. And Reggie, I think you hit on a interesting future topic, which is the historic role of political parties. I think it's easy to draw lots of conclusions from recent developments, but I think it's important to look at the history of both political parties as well, and put that into some context.
I wrote an article about that last year, Dave. The history of both of our
I look
main
forward to
political
reading
parties.
it, but I think that's a topic that might be an interesting topic for us to tackle. And Eric, I would point out real quickly before we close that I was in Madison this week, the first time I've been in Madison in 15 months, and I did have a chance to visit my barber. So I don't know if you noticed or not, but I did get my hair cut. With that, have a great Memorial Day weekend, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks back on 2 Bald Guys. Thanks.
All right, guys.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the opportunity.